Hello friends, my name is Nick, and today we're gonna sit down and discuss my weirdest houseplants. I saw a comment on one of my videos recently suggesting I make this video, and I thought it's a really good idea. However, I'm having a really difficult time defining weird in my brain. What makes a plant weird? Is it a plant that just looks weird and unique, or is it a plant that you might not see often or ever, and that you can't find at your local houseplant stores? It's just really out there. There's so many different things that could classify a plant as weird. I'm kind of combining both of those criteria today in the 5 weirdest plants that I think I have in my home. I have a lot of houseplants though, so there might be 1 or 2 or 3 that maybe I didn't notice that might be a little bit weirder than these, but I still think that all 5 of these fit those criteria I mentioned very well. So the first one I'm going to talk about today might be peeking into the camera frame, so I'm going to get it out of the way. So this is a Monstera deliciosa. This is a green variegated Monstera deliciosa. I do not know if at this point in time this has a name. I don't really seek it out online because I have been growing it for a couple of years, so I don't know if this is something you can find on Etsy or eBay at this point, or if it has a name or how much the price would go for. But how I got my hands on this plant was back when I was working at the houseplant store. We had just gotten a shipment of Monstera deliciosas after they were MIA for so long. Believe it or not, even plants as common as Monstera deliciosa in today's market were really difficult to get your hands on at one point in time in the plant market. And me and my coworker were just merchandising with the Monsteras and the other plants that we got in the shipment. And my coworker noticed that in one of the pots of Monstera, there was a little tiny little plant that was much smaller than the rest of the plants, because Monstera deliciosas are 9 times out of 10, unless you're buying a large established plant, they're grown from seed when you buy them at the nursery. So there was one plant that was a little bit smaller, or a lot smaller than the other ones in the pot, and had a little bit of green speckling on it. And then later that same day, in that same batch of Monsteras, I noticed another plant had a little bit of some kind of marbling or speckling to it. So we ended up kind of just softly wrestling those plants out of the pot, because since they were much younger or less established than the larger, less non-variegated plants in the pot, that it didn't have as much of a root system. So we were able to just kind of squeeze it out, which if you do find a plant like that when you're a customer at a plant store, please purchase the plant. Don't steal it. Even doing that would be stealing, but obviously they were our plants that we worked with, so we were allowed to do so. We were growing both of them in the same pot at the houseplant store for a while, and people kept asking us if they could purchase it because it was really interesting as a leaf or two was coming in and it was really starting to get some of that nice green variegation on it. We didn't want to sell it, and people just kept asking even though there was a not for sale sign in it. So I just took it home. Thankfully, I was the one who was able to take it home, and I've been growing it in my collection ever since. So I did not purchase this plant. This is just one that fell into my lap, fortunately, and it's been a joy to watch grow. It's definitely slow growing, not necessarily as slow as the Albo Monstera, but it is definitely not as fast growing as my solid green Monstera, which checks out in a way. It's still got green in the variegation. I'm sure there's still less chlorophyll in there, but I don't know how the science works in that. I do still have the other plant too. It's just, it looks very mutated and not the best, and it's got a lot of round tips on it. I don't know. It's just not one that was meant to survive. It's just hanging on, while this one was the cream of the crop and just looks amazing. So I really love this plant. It's been a joy to watch grow. I'm really happy that I have this nice leaf to show you, because it was a little underwhelming when it was just these 2 leaves sitting here, but I have a difficult time getting this to hold on to more than 4 leaves at a time, I would say. Right now it's only 3, so, but neglected this at points in time. But I've been on a really good kick with my plants in the last couple of months or so, and all of them are really thriving and really looking their best, and this one even more so now that it has this gorgeous leaf. But I guess the moral of the story with this is to just keep your eyes peeled when you are shopping for Monstera deliciosas, even if it's not necessarily a plant that you're looking to bring in your home, but just peek through them, especially with the larger pots that have a lot more seeds in them. The 4 and 6 inch pots might only have just a couple of plants in there, and obviously are much less likely to have a variegated plant amongst them. But the large 10 inch pots and 8 inch pots are gonna have probably 15 to 20 plants in them at some time. So much more of a chance to find a variegated plant. So keep your eyes peeled. That other Monstera that I said I have might actually technically be weirder than this one because, like I said, it looks like so weird and mutated and still has this green variegation, but this one just looks so much more aesthetically pleasing. So obviously I wanted to talk about this one today. I'm gonna talk about this one next because I have talked about it recently. I kind of want to get it out of the way, and the other three I don't think I've talked about in a long time or at all. So this is my Sansevieria pinguicula. They call this the walking Sansevieria. It's a very interesting looking Sansevieria, or Dracaena, I guess they're called now since they've been reclassified, but we're going to be calling them Sansevieria for a long time, probably the rest of our lifespan. This one caught my eyes a couple years ago at the Philadelphia Flower Show. They have like a competition section where people will submit their plants in, and I would always see these Sansevierias with like the little legs that are coming down, and the specimens that I would see, some of the plants are like up like a foot out of the pot. It's really something to behold, and this is just a baby right here. This started growing for me last year, and it's a very slow growing houseplant, so this is still what the baby looks like. It probably could be separated from the mother at this point, but I love the way that they are connected. So this plant just came out of this plant right here and started to grow from the end of this, and now it's growing upright towards the sun, and while it started growing upright, it started shooting these roots down. So it was really fun to watch this plant just form itself. I was really confused about how this one, to start out, was even just the way it is, with its very structural root system coming out of the ground very visibly. I do collect Sansevieria in a sense. I'm not like a huge Sansevieria collector in comparison to like the way I like to collect Hoyas and Peperomias, but I do have like 10 different varieties in my collection, but this is hands down the most out there unique one, and probably the only one that I have in my collection that would be very difficult to find and store. I feel like only like specialty stores would probably have this. Otherwise, you're probably gonna have to purchase this online. I bought mine on Etsy, and maybe houseplant stores would avoid keeping this in its store because, quite frankly, it's a hazard. These spikes on here, these are sharp. They are very sharp. I keep them out of the way for my cat. They are that sharp. I do not trust her around this because, ooh, that could really do some damage on like your eyes. Oh God, I'm sorry, I don't even want to talk about that. Ugh, I'm very squeamish. But yeah, I'm very careful when I'm handling this houseplant, as I am with any sharp houseplant, but this one in particular is literally like a weapon. So be very mindful. It does look a lot, or very similar to another Sansevieria. I brought it right next to me here just so I can show you in comparison. The Sansevieria Samurai. This one's not gonna leave the soil and still does have sharp tips, but these are like 5 times as sharp as these. Like, these aren't gonna cut ya. If you get it at the wrong angle, maybe it'll cut you, but this, you could just slightly graze by it in the wrong way and it's gonna slice you open. So please proceed with caution if you want this really amazing houseplant, but I love it. I'm just, as I cannot stress even more than I am right now, I'm very, very careful around it. Oh, and I should just say about the care, it requires full sun. Unlike some Sansevierias, like the standard Sansevieria trifasciata, which is just that standard strappy leaf Sansevieria that you can put in darker corners of your home and it'll withstand those conditions for a little while before they kind of get a little wimpy. This is a very succulent houseplant. It needs full sun, so I'm growing mine in an east-facing window, and it's growing perfectly fine. I'm sure west or south might be even better if it's, you know, got some really good sun, but east works totally fine for me, and I'm sure a north-facing window will be fine if it's got good enough exposure. It probably doesn't need the direct sunlight, it just needs really bright light exposure. I think this one is just like really cool, really unique. This is an Anthurium. I think on first glance it looks like a Schefflera. I have another Anthurium in my home that's a little bit more mainstream, the Anthurium polysticum, which kind of looks like a combination of a Schefflera and like a hemp or marijuana plant. These leaves are much more indicative of a regular, just like Schefflera arboricola, the standard umbrella tree that you're gonna find at every single local houseplant store for just a couple of dollars. I obviously got to figure out what I'm gonna do about this support situation because this thing has been growing really fast. I only got it last summer or spring. I got it from Glass Houseworks. I typically order from them like every summer. This has been growing so fast. I feel like it was probably just like up to here, maybe around here when I got the plant. And it's grown all of this, and for a hot second it wasn't growing any leaves, as you can see right here. So I actually could probably like cut it back to here and propagate it. You can see there's some pretty robust aerial roots coming off it. There's like 20 little aerial roots going just around the node there. So I feel like that would root up no problem at all. But this new leaf coming in right here is just so gorgeous, and got a new one coming in. I guess this one only has 3 leaves, so I don't know. I could consider cutting it back, but a really fun looking houseplant that on first glance, I think most people would think this is a Schefflera, and I really love those like doppelganger houseplants. I think I did a whole video about that a year or 2 ago, about plants that just look like other plants. Like they might be an Anthurium, but they look exactly like a Schefflera. Or they might be a philodendron and they look like a palm tree or something like that, you know? So many fun things out there. This is just one of those plants that very unique for many reasons. Beyond, oh, did I even say the name? Oh, I didn't even say the name. I'm so sorry. So this is an Anthurium aemulum. I can't guarantee that name's correct. The place that I got this from is notorious for having the incorrect taxonomy, but I don't really care what the name is, just because it is so cool. One of those plants I'm just gonna sit here and ramble about for 10 minutes, just complimenting it because I just enjoy it so much. One diss though, this planter. I got it from Pottery Barn, and you know, you would think Pottery Barn has good stuff, but this thing is just like bubbling up and exploding all the way around. So if you see a planter at Pottery Barn, maybe skip it. I think it's only a matter of time before that glaze just completely chips off. So this plant, I think it's very neat. I think it's probably going to be the least exciting out of all the ones I'm talking about today, but I'm a Peperomia collector, and this is a really funky Peperomia. Actually, you know what? I've been out of the industry for 2+ years at this point, 2.5 years. I do not know what an inventory list looks like anymore when you're ordering plants. This could be a plant that's widely available at this point. I don't even really go to houseplant stores that often because I have a lot of plants. I don't need to really do any plant shopping ever. But this is a Peperomia scandens variety. It's like a gray variety. A friend of mine found this and was like growing it out, and she shared a cutting with me, and this is what I have. It's grown out quite nicely. A couple of the vines, you know, if I pull this one major vine away, it's a little wimpy, but you know, I keep this vine up in here and just, it makes everything look a little bit more full, and I have this nice vine up here. Now, Peperomia scandens, if you're gonna see them at your local houseplant stores, they have like a heart-shaped leaf. Now this one has a more lanceolate-shaped leaf, a little bit more thinner, elongated. That kind of sets it apart from the rest, and it does have this gray, like ghost veination to it. I really don't think, I'm sorry, I can't see the monitor. I have no idea what you're seeing right now. But it's not the most pronounced, but if you get really close to it, it's just got like a nice little Peperomia orba type venation to it, if you're familiar with Peperomia orba or the pixie Peperomia. I'm a huge Peperomia collector, and I have a lot of weirder varieties in the sense that they're just like more out there species that you're not gonna see normally. Scandens is an arguably common species that you're going to see at most of your local houseplant stores, but just this variety being one that my friend found, and just growing it out, and you know, like I said, it could be a plant that is widely available now, and I just don't know because I'm living under a rock in comparison to what I used to be, but I just think it's really neat. And I love displaying it next to another one of my Peperomia scandens because this one is a little thinner, like I said, so it kind of gives the illusion that the whole mess over there is much fuller over by my little mirror, my mirror that I'm not convinced is not cursed over in my kitchen. But some of you will probably know much more about this than me at this point, if that is like a plant that's available or not. Actually, I think when my friend found it, some like taxonomist like reached out to her and was like, we want to give this a name if you want to name it. And I don't think anything ever actually came to fruition with that. So yeah, just a whole bunch of mystery shrouded with this plant in my own mind. But as I've said 5 times now, literally this could be a plant you can find at every houseplant store at this point, and I'm just unaware. So this last one I'm going to talk about today is not that. This is definitely one that you can't find in most places at all. Probably because people aren't really interested in it. Dare I say? I'm interested in it. I'm not convinced that the masses are interested in Dischidia plants. So this is a Dischidia acuminata. This is like a clumping Dischidia. Is that the word to describe it? It stays so tight. You can see how many leaves are on this plant. There's literally like 20 leaves on this plant. There's some new leaves growing up top right here, but there isn't much stem at all. There really isn't much growing stem. In fact, I would have the dickens of a time trying to propagate this thing because I would have no idea where to cut it because there's just like I said, there's no stem. It's all just staying really clumped together. The leaves are giving Hoya kentiana or Hoya weirdii. They're a little bit more less. They're a little bit more less. That's how my mind is saying it. They just are, they have less. It's less enticing. It doesn't have like the edges that like turn purple and like the hard crease down the center. It's just a little bit more minute. The leaves though are very like, I love the way they feel. It's like a buttery, waxy, leathery. It's really nice. There's no reason to go out and purchase this plant to feel it. It's not the most groundbreaking thing. I just like it because it feels kind of buttery. But I have it mounted on a little mount that I made on a piece of cork bark with some sphagnum moss and then some decorative moss to cover it up. And I just wrapped it all around with some fishing line and used a little bit of garden wire or probably something thicker like bonsai wire because this is getting all rusty now, to hang it up on my wall. I just pop this in the sink every like 5 or 7 days to give it a good soaking, stand it up, let it dry so it's not just dripping all over my floor if I hang it back up, and then I hang it back up a couple hours later, and that's how I take care of this thing. It dries out pretty quickly, which is why I do have to water it like once a week. It's also hanging out by one of my grow lights from Soltech, so you can use code, is it Nick 2023 or Philly Foliage? I can't remember. It's on screen to save 15% on soltech.com if you need any grow lights. I also have some other codes that will save you some dough at plant stores online and other. I'm losing my train of thought as I'm saying this. Check my description if you want to do some shopping. I got some codes. You earn me some commission. Thank you very much in advance. Anyway, this Dischidia gets a decent amount of light, so it does dry out pretty quickly. But if I was to forget about it for too long, like most Dischidias, I don't think it would really care. Dischidia handle drought much better than Hoyas do. Like Hoyas like to dry out, but they want to be watered as soon as they dry out. Dischidias don't mind sitting like neglected dry for like extended periods of time. Of course, they grow better when they are receiving a little bit of attention though. But out of all my mounted plants, and I do have a decent amount of mounted plants around my home, this is hands down my most interesting one. I forget the name half the time. I feel like I had to do research like a year ago because I completely forgot what the name was, and it's just so out there. I had like no way of figuring out what it was. But yeah, I think that's gonna do it for today's video. My weirdest plants. Like I said, I had a really hard time defining what that was. Let me know if I have plants that you think are weirder that I did not talk about, or if you have plants that are freaking weird. Let me know in the comments. I would love to hear. But just to recap the 5 plants that I mentioned today, we had the Dischidia acuminata. I don't know if it has a common name. Actually, I don't really think that any of these have common names except for the Sansevieria. We have this funky Peperomia right here, the Peperomia scandens variety. We had the Anthurium aemulum, this weird Schefflera vining type of Anthurium. I've been having very bad luck with the more foliage heavy Anthuriums, like the crystalline venation, heart-shaped leaf foliage Anthuriums in my home, but these vining Anthuriums grow so well for me and they're such a joy to watch grow. The walking Sansevieria, the Sansevieria pinguicula, and last but most certainly not least, with all of its gorgeousness, we have the Monstera deliciosa, green, variegated. Let me know if any of these have names. As I mentioned already, been out of the industry for a while, so these could literally be plants that are on the market and have names and aren't as weird or unique as I think, but they're still weird and unique to me. So that's really all that matters. So thank you so much for joining me today. If you don't already, you can follow me on Instagram and TikTok at Philly Foliage. If you want to support me monetarily, you can subscribe to my Patreon. Subscribe to my YouTube channel if you haven't already, and I will see you guys in my next video. Have a great day.